In our first episode, we looked at the relevance of activism. But now let's talk about the issues surrounding our world, which has pushed these online social and political movements. Up first is the Black Lives Matter movement. In this episode, I'll be speaking to a young racial injustice activist based in New York and the communications officer at the Black Curriculum. According to recent data, following George Floyd's death last year, the Black Lives Matter hashtag was used roughly 47.8 million times on Twitter from May the 26th to June the 7th. George Floyd was an unarmed black man who died in the custody of Minneapolis police on May the 26th. Soon later, a video was posted online of a police officer, now known as Derek Chauvin, kneeling on Floyd's neck as he screamed the words, "I can't breathe." The Black Lives Matter hashtag was found in 218,000 tweets after Floyd's death. Beginning in Minneapolis, protests spread across the world over Floyd's death, police brutality and racism faced by black people. On May the 28th, the hashtag was found in nearly 8.8 million tweets. The Black Lives Matter hashtag is often used in police-related deaths of black Americans, but has since been adopted as an online social movement. The widespread outrage saw young people leading many of the protests. One of these young people was 20-year-old Nupur Kiazolu.
I definitely believe that summer 2020 was a reckoning, not just in the United States, but around the world. It woke people up to the grave realities of Black people every single day, not just in America, but around the world, because this fight for Black liberation does not just reside in the United States. It is a global fight. And the quarantine really forced people to look at the dire situation Black folks are in.
According to a latest study, black men are about 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white men in the United States. The highest level of inequality in mortality risk is experienced by black men. In February 2012, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was fatally shot by George Zimmerman after claiming it was self-defense. Trayvon's story inspired then 12-year-old Nupur to take a stand at her school, beginning her activism journey.
When Trayvon Martin was murdered, my immediate emotions were anger and confusion. And I knew that I had to do something. Mind you, I'm in the 6th grade at the time in middle school in the Deep South, where racial tensions are very, very thick. And Trayvon Martin's case heightened them even more. I came up with this idea to lead this silent protest at my school. And it was just me by myself. I went home. I came up with this idea to go to school the following day with this gray hoodie on and a message taped to my back stating, "Do I look suspicious?" And I bought Skittles and iced tea from 7-Eleven to represent what Trayvon had in his hand at the time of his death. It did cause a lot of controversy the following day. The many teachers and staff felt like I was being too political, but nonetheless, I persisted. Again, the next day, I come right back, same message, and I ended up getting written up by my history teacher. Before I went to the principal's office, I went to my math teacher, who's a Black woman, and I'm like, "Yo, Miss Gibbs, this is what it is. I'm about to be suspended." And this lady literally risked her entire career by marching down to the principal's office with me in solidarity. And by the time my teacher and I got out of the principal's office, it was lunchtime. Every single student in there had their hoodies on with the same exact message taped to their back. And that's when I knew that being an activist and organizer was my calling. And my teacher and I just stood there in shock and cried. And I particularly was so moved because I grew up as someone that was extremely bullied because I always stood out like a sore thumb amongst my peers. So it just goes to show that no matter what walk of life you come from, your voice is powerful and you can effectuate change.
Nupur began her career as an activist at just 12 years old and served as the president of the Black Lives Matter Greater New York. She discusses the challenges she faced along the way.
I would say coming to terms with the reality of how Black women, Black trans women, Black queer folks are so unprotected in the spaces that people would expect us to be protected in. Even without a title, because there were people that made me feel like I would not be able to do this work sustainably without a title. But even without a title, I am more than capable of doing this work and effectuating change, because I never started this work with a title to begin with. It was just me, just Nepal, doing what was right, coming out of a transition period because of the things that I've experienced in previous leadership roles, and really just having to bounce back as a young Black woman.
One of the goals Nupal has set is to one day become President of the United States.
Everything that I've experienced on the front lines, they will go with me when I run for office. So, the ultimate goal is to run for president and become president in 2036. But right now, I'm just focused on, effectuating change on a local level.
The events of last year have made us think about our attitudes towards racism within the UK. Since the protests, Prime Minister Boris Johnson appointed the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. The report, which was released in March 2021, was led with much criticism from MPs as well as UN experts. The report denied evidence of institutional racism, as reporting hate crime and race-related incidents is now widely encouraged by police forces. However, 3/4 of hate crimes reported were race hate crimes within the last year. It also states the government's stance against bringing down statues and instead wanting all children to reclaim their British heritage. However, the calls to decolonise the school curriculum and introduce Black history have not been answered by the government. I speak to AD Tadasi at the Black curriculum about their demands.
And the campaign was targeted towards Gavin Williamson, who's the Secretary of State for Education, and we were calling on him to meet with us and talk about making Black British history mandatory on the curriculum. And of course, June being, the height of the revival of several social movement and justice protests, we've also got the backdrop of lockdown and people at home feeling frustrated, but also having so much more time and access to digital campaigns and online conversations. And so the campaign was a huge digital success. A lot of people were sort of reconfiguring and looking inward in terms of their understanding of race relations, racial politics, racial history. But more importantly, they were trying to figure out what this meant in the British context, which many people didn't have that historical context or understanding of. We encouraged, teachers, young people, educators to campaign, to lobby, to reach out, to sign our open letter. We had several, MPs in support and solidarity of our campaign.
The Black curriculum's open letter reached over 200,000 downloads. But what is an actual Black curriculum, you may ask? AD explains what it is.
So essentially what we're trying to remind people is that, for one, Black history or Black British history should never be relegated to the month of October or Black History Month alone. And so what we mean by a Black curriculum or the teaching of Black British histories is for these histories to be taught all year round, as if it was just as our common or our mainstream understanding of history. And so through our work in curriculum consultation and audits, we work with schools to help them embed those histories into already existing schemes of work. And so we're not asking, for a new curriculum to be made. It's just understanding how Black British histories can be slotted into our British understanding of history. We don't need to look to America to understand, the life of Martin Luther King, if we have our own histories here, which we don't learn in the curriculum.
The campaign to make change within the curriculum continues, but it's safe to say our attitudes towards history is changing.
The fact that we are feeling uncomfortable means that we are heading in the right direction. Because the reason we exist is to teach histories that aren't being taught. And so whether it be the statues or whatever it might be, the statue's existence is one thing, but our understanding of it is another thing. A lot of these statues we didn't know existed, or we knew existed and walked past by every day but didn't know the context behind.